Dr. Chris Labos is no stranger to CJAD. In fact, he can be heard here regularly on Sunday mornings at 8:10, on Weekends with Ken, and he joins us from time to time to talk about a variety of health issues. Well, now Dr. Chris Labos can add author to his business card because he's just written a brand new book. Chris, this your first book?
Technically, it's the second book. The first one was an echocardiography manual for cardiology residents, so I'm not surprised no one's heard of it. It was for a very niche market. This is the first book for the general public.
I don't remember reading that first one. So this new one, I love the title, which basically says, Does Coffee Cause Cancer? So let's get into it. That's one question, but basically this book sets out to, I guess, as far as dealing with myths, and there's so many in health, deal with as many as they can, right?
Yeah, and I mean, the point of the book is not just to deal with these individual myths, even though they are important and they are persistent and they just keep coming up over and over again, especially when you talk about red wine and heart disease. It seems like, every time we talk about it, we have to keep reminding people, like, no, red wine is actually not good for your heart. But the point of the book also is that when you read it, each of the chapters is also going to give you a bit of a mini epidemiology primer to understand why these myths cropped up and why they are persistent, and why the same types of mistakes in research keep happening over and over again. Because once you understand why these things are happening, you'll become a slightly more sophisticated consumer of the medical literature and understand why you shouldn't react to every new headline, to every new story, because, that's why people are confused. How come eggs are good for you one day and bad for you the next? Well, when you read the book, you'll start to understand why things have evolved the way they did.
I wonder, so your book starts with your interaction with this guy, Jim, who doesn't want to hear it about vitamin C. And I wonder if the medical perspective for many people can kind of almost make it more complicated. You know what I mean? We want to believe what we want to believe, Dr. Labos. And if it suits our purposes, then we're going to believe what we want to believe, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. And I mean, there's a reason why these things stick around. They are either convenient or easy, right? To tell people, look, if you get a cold, there's literally really nothing you can do. I mean, the cold is going to pass through you and you're going to recover as quickly as you're going to recover. Nothing you do really makes a difference. And so when we get into the vitamin C chapter, you can really see why do people talk about vitamin C being good for the cold and what does that actually mean? And then you learn an interesting mathematical principle behind it. But these things persist because telling people do nothing is just very unappealing for human nature. People want to do something, even if that thing is useless. And, people may say, well, what's the harm? It's not that much money. And you're like, well, okay, maybe not. But, all these supplements, all these pills, all these things people take, if they don't actually work, this is money that adds up over the course of months and years. If you're spending $20 to $30 every month buying things that are unnecessary, well, that's making an impact on your pocketbook at the end of the year.
Right, but I think you could argue sometimes, an impact on your pocketbook is something, but if psychologically it makes you feel better,
sure,
that has a value to some degree, does it not?
I suppose it does. I think where it becomes problematic, and I think this is part of the reason why talking about food was a good choice, I hope, for the book, because there's a more fundamental underlying principle here, which is when we talk about vitamin C, and for people, when you read the book, you'll see why. Like, why do people claim that it's good for you? It has to do with really looking at just a very, very tiny subset of the studies. You have the studies that are overall negative. You have a small segment of the studies that are positive, and people just hyper-focus on that very, very small segment of the studies that are positive that fit our preconceived narrative. And you could say for vitamin C, like, who cares? You take it when you get sick, no harm, no foul either way. It becomes problematic, though, when you start applying it to other therapies, to more expensive therapies, to potentially dangerous therapies. And so that's the lesson. It's almost, we're talking about food, but we're using it as a means for you to understand. It's like, these are the questions I have to ask when I'm trying to consume this latest health study.
So I look at a couple here. So this one, for example, red wine is good for your heart. We went through this whole phase because I guess the folks in the wine industry, big wine, spent millions of dollars, of course, promoting this fact. They have a product to sell. And then you read, not that long ago, that now we consider wine, never mind not good for you, it's a level 1 carcinogen, really, right? I mean, we know it's not good for you. But that message, to Natasha's point, you're like, yeah, you know what? I don't drink that much of it. That's fine. I don't care. I'll close my eyes to it.
I drink enough of it, and I like it, and I want to keep drinking
How do you deal with that?
Well, I think you have to say, look, if you enjoy drinking wine, as long as you're not going to be driving afterwards, you can do whatever you want in the same way that you can eat ice cream and you can eat potato chips. Where it becomes problematic is when we start doing sloppy science to convince ourselves of something that isn't true. Because when you make it okay to do that for wine, you start making it okay to do for other things. And it's important to understand why some of the studies showed this benefit. It has to do with a concept called reverse causation, or the sick quitter effect. And if you read the book, you'll find out what that stuff is. But now you realize, like, oh, this type of stuff can keep coming up in other studies as well. So if you're going to be designing medical research, now you have to start thinking to yourself, I need to be aware of this problem. So that's the point. Like, these problems are not specific to food. They are generally applicable. Right. So you read the book, you'll learn something about food, but you're going to learn something about medical science in general, not to become overly nihilistic that, all medical research is wrong, because you do hear that from some people. No, but there are issues, and this is how we can make it better. So it also becomes a much broader conversation about how can we improve the way we do medical research and analyze.
I have to ask the question because, I think it's so appropriate for the times we live in. How much worse, and I'm going to say it that way, have the internet and social media made these things?
Well, it seems like they are worse. I think the problem is that it's much easier to amplify stuff. Now, that being said, these things have been amplified before. The reason why the red wine thing is so popular, at least in North America, is because of 60 Minutes. Red wine was not that common in North America right up until 1991, when Morley Safer did this segment on 60 Minutes about the French paradox. And really, from that point forward, red wine sales in Canada and the U.S. really, really shot up. So, beforehand, TV existed, radio existed, these things did spread. But it seems and it feels as if they were more one-off episodes. The problem with the internet is, number one, nothing on the internet ever dies, whereas you can't really go back and watch old episodes of 60 Minutes that easily. You can find them in archives, obviously. But the good thing about TV is that at a certain point it would go away and it wouldn't come back. Yeah. The problem with the internet is that it sticks around forever, and these things just keep getting reshared and recirculated ad nauseum.
I have to just say one of the things, because as we're talking about it, it sounds like, that you're just laying things out medically and dispelling these myths. But you're a storyteller. These are stories. You're telling anecdotes where this comes up in your day-to-day life. And I'm assuming that must be kind of what compelled you to write this book in the first place. Like, as a radio personality, I get asked all the time, say this to the mayor, or can you do this? And I figure, is that what it's like for you day to day, doctor? Like, everybody's always asking you things or trying to get information out of you?
Yeah, these things do come up off and again. So, why do you pick these particular topics? It's because, these are issues that people come up with. The red wine, is red meat bad for you? Is salt bad? These are questions that keep coming up. And so, I could have written it as a straightforward book, and that was the original plan when I'd written the first chapter as a sample to show to the publishers. They said, okay, it's not bad. And then we were sort of bouncing around ideas, and he said, how do we make it better? And I said, well, let's write it as if it were a novel. And so this is a story that has a beginning, middle, and an end. Yeah. And, the original, and then the second version of that was it was a story, but it was very sort of straightforward. It was question answer. You use the characters to ask the questions the reader would probably have. And I thought, this is pretty good. And then I showed it to a friend of mine, and this is the chapter on coffee, which I guess you haven't gotten to yet, but it's the main character is talking to a barista, and I showed it to a friend of mine who was largely the inspiration for the barista. And I said, well, what do you think? And she goes, pretty good, but I kept expecting him to ask her out at the end. And I thought, aha, this is actually a romantic comedy.
There you go.
So then the story became a romantic comedy as well.
Chris, we're out of time. The book is called Coffee Causes Cancer. You buy this? I'm sorry. Did I say it does? I'm sorry. Does coffee cause cancer? Where do you buy this? Can you go Amazon? Where do you find this?
Everywhere. Amazon, Chapters, Indigo. You can order it online. If you go to the places where you normally get books, it'll be there.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Soon to be a major motion picture.
Yeah.
Dr. Chris Labos, thank you very much, Chris.
My pleasure.
Take good care.